Lanthe's backstory. Chapter 1. The Fight. Once there was a girl named Lanthe. She was born into a perfect family. They weren't rich, but they had enough food, enough money, enough things, and enough love. Lanthe was a pretty little girl with an unusual name. She had chocolate brown hair and great skin. Her face was cluttered with freckles. Lanthe wasn't bullied, but it was obvious that people wanted to bully her. But they couldn't because the school was against bullying. They couldn't do it in secret because there was people everywhere, and Lanthe lived far away from the school. Lanthe was outside waiting for her mom to pick her up from school one day when 2 girls and 1 boy walked up behind her. "Hey." "Hello?" "Lanthe, right?" one of the girls said in a disgusted tone. Lanthe turned around. "What the heck do you want? If it's wasting my time, then please leave." "Geez, you don't need to be that rude," the boy said, kicking Lanthe in the shin. "Hey!" "Ugh, she's not worth it, Brian," the other girl said. "Let's just go." "Fine, you guys go. I'll catch up later." "Ugh, Brian, just..." the girl groaned. "Fine, we'll be at Emmy's house." "Okay." Brian turned to Lanthe. "Let's finish this." 5 minutes later, Brian and Lanthe had a crowd watching. Half of them were cheering Lanthe's name, and the other half were cheering, "Brian!" The shouting for Brian was drowned out by cheers of happiness when Lanthe pinned Brian to the ground. "Next time," Lanthe grunted as she started to get up, "make sure your victim's weaker than you." Brian lay bloody on the ground, clearly close to passing out from all the blood around him. Lanthe made her way to her bike, seeing no sign of her mother, and when she got there, a teacher pulled her aside. "What you did back there is highly against the rules," the teacher scolded her. It sounded like the teacher didn't know he was fighting back, and even more violently, even throwing in empty threats like, "My mom and dad will find you and kill you, and I can kill you with my bare hands." Sounds like someone didn't see all the super obvious bruises and busted nose that I have, Lanthe thought. But instead of walking with the teacher to the principal's office to probably get her expelled for a week, she unlocked her bike lock, saying she'll unlock it now so that she'll go home quickly to tell her mom as soon as she could, and got on it and rode as fast as she could to get home. Her plan was that if the teacher or any other teacher pulled up next to her in their car, she would make it look like she was being kidnapped. Screaming child behavior and all, but luckily she rode home peacefully and no teachers tried to get her, plugging in her earbuds so that the sound of the passing cars wouldn't drown out her thoughts. When she got to her house, her parents were standing outside with the teacher and the principal. "How on earth did they get here?" Lanthe contemplated to herself. "We heard about your little bullying session that you had before your mother came to pick you up. Mind explaining why the principal had to call us because of it?" her father spoke. Before she could answer, another car pulled into the driveway, and out got the teacher that pulled Lanthe aside with the same bloody boy that Lanthe had fought. "You," Lanthe mumbled. Brian stumbled over to Lanthe and managed to kick her in the shin again without any of the adults noticing. "Next time you should make sure your victims aren't the principal's child," Brian said, so only she could hear. The adults called them both over, and Lanthe had to tell her side of the story. Then Brian told his side. Of course, the adults picked Brian's side because he was the son of the principal, and why would he ever lie? Lanthe was expelled from school for a month and grounded for that same month. Lanthe was curled up in a ball in her room by the time the adults decided to talk in the kitchen instead of her room. She wasn't crying or anything, but she sure was mad at them. Just to freak them out if they came back in, Lanthe started rocking herself back and forth in her little ball in the dark. Fortunately for her, her mother decided to come into the room when she was starting to rock herself. "Lanthe, this isn't like you." Her mother closed the door and turned on the lights. "Of course it's not like me. You're all taking his side. He threatened me. What if those threats go through? You'll all be sorry." "I'm sure you're not going to die, and if you do, we'll all mourn you." "It's not what I meant." "Lanthe, please don't tell me that you've been reading those books about hauntings again." Lanthe's mother curled her arm around her. "Well, guess what? I have. Does that tick you off?" Lanthe pulled her mother's arm off her and continued rocking herself back and forth. Suddenly, her mother took her hand and placed some sort of microphone on it. You'll be going to the store soon to get some groceries, and since it's getting dark out, Brian will be going with you. If he does make any threats, it'll be recorded on there, and you can bring it back to me, okay? Okay. And with that, Lanthe and Brian went out to get some groceries. The grocery store was just around the corner, so they could just walk. Brian had led the way because if he didn't, he would tell them that he nearly passed out because of her. They went through an alleyway that Lanthe didn't recognize, and Lanthe had fetched the groceries more than once. Where are we? Oh, it's just a shortcut, Brian called from ahead. Suddenly they stopped. Brian, it's pitch black here. I want to get out, Lanthe urged. Oh, be quiet. I'm just texting someone, Brian replied. Lanthe sighed, looking around the pitch black alleyway. It was scarier than a horror movie. It felt like she was in a horror movie. It felt like she'd be the first one to die. After a while, Brian stopped texting and just sat there like he was waiting for someone. Who are you waiting for? Lanthe questioned. What do you mean? It's clear as the night sky that you're waiting for someone. Fine, I'm waiting for someone else to come so that we won't be so alone. All right then. As soon as she said that, someone rounded the corner. Get her on the wall, the figure ordered. Brian pushed Lanthe to the wall and duct taped her hands. What the heck? Brian then duct taped her mouth shut. This is for beating me up earlier. He punched her in the nose. Slow down, Brian. You don't want to kill her so quickly, do you? The vicar pulled Brian off her. Lanthe squirmed to make sure they knew she wanted to say something. You better not scream, or I'll slit your throat, the figure said as they peeled the duct tape off of Lance's mouth. Let me guess, you're going to say something like, You'll never get away with this, Brian mocked. No, rather, if you've killed me, I'd rather it be long and painful. I know I'll struggle, but I have a good feeling that you'll regret whatever you do. She's an annoying one, isn't she? Brian groaned. No, I do respect the fact that she's embracing death, especially at her age. But when things come down to death, it's never what you expect, the figure responded. In fact, I'm surprised she hasn't recognized me yet. Lanthe had just now realized that the figure had a cloak on, but as soon as the cloaked figure threw back her hood, she immediately recognized her. Emmy? Yep, that's my name. And yes, I am the girl that came up to you earlier. Huh, I thought it would be like one of my old friends. I guess this is more reasonable. Do you ever shut up? Brian said, putting a fresh piece of duct tape over Lance's mouth. Let's cut to the chase, Emmy said as she stepped closer to Lanthe. Emmy pulled a knife out of her inner cloak pocket. Not a plastic knife, not a butter knife, a real butcher's knife. Brian, do you mind destroying the little microphone in her hand? It'd be my pleasure. He grabbed the microphone and crushed it under his foot. Emmy then walked even closer to Lanthe, peeling the duct tape off her mouth. She then slit her mouth. Lance's screams of pain were muffled with Emmy's sleeve. I told you if you screamed, I'd slit your throat. The knife drew close to Lance's throat. Every second felt like a minute, and this is what she was asked for. She asked for it to be long and painful. She could already feel the blood dripping from her mouth. Finally, the knife broke through her skin, releasing blood everywhere. Then there was vomit. Sorry, blood just gets me like that. Someone had said it, but Lanthe couldn't tell who. The cries of pain and the sweet voice of death drowned out anything that had happened, but she could tell one thing. The people who killed her had fled the scene. All that was left was something tucked under Lance's feet, small but rectangular. The next and last thing Lanthe ever heard was police sirens. Had it been 2 hours? Maybe 3. Lanthe didn't know. All she knew was that she was on the brink of death, and finally death took her in like a loving parent. Chapter 2. Star's Cooking Kitchen. The sounds of title screen music awoke Lanthe. She was stuck in a permanent loop of waving. As she looked around, she realized that she was in a video game. There was window out into the real world. All she could see was a wall and a bed up against the wall. There were a few posters on the wall for a band that had just gotten popular earlier this year. How long had it been since she had gotten murdered? Was she even dead? Her thoughts were cut off abruptly by the sound of a creaky door and footsteps. Then someone came into the room.
Yeah, Mom, I know. Get ready for dinner. The mysterious figure was talking to someone off the screen. The figure had light blonde hair and sparkling green eyes. Wearing a light blue shirt paired with denim shorts and some blue Converse. She came over to the window that stretched to the ends of the wall, trapping Lanthe inside the box. They sat down in the desk chair and stared endlessly into the screen. Finally, they moved something off the screen, and a giant mouse cursor, bigger than Lanthe and shaped like a pink heart, started to move. Lanthe used all her energy attempting to move, but got nothing. She pulled every wisp of strength out of her and used it to turn her head ever so slightly.
She realized she had text next to her spelling out the words Star's Cooking Kitchen, and directly under that were 3 options: Start, Options, and Help. The cursor, instead of coming towards her, clicked the Start button, and the lights in the box went out. When the lights came back on, Lanthe was in a kitchen. Chapter 3. A Weird Video Game. Kaylee walked into the living room. It had been 2 days since that girl that Brian had fought had gone missing, and thought foul play was involved, but no one would ever believe a child. "Dear, the video game you wanted is on your desk," her mom said as she sat down on the couch. Kaylee immediately stood up and ran to her room. She bolted to her computer and loaded up the new game, Star's Cooking Kitchen. It was on the loading screen for what seemed like an hour. So Kaylee went back out into the living room and counted the seconds ticking by on the clock.